let's get going here, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for attending. A couple of administrative things I mentioned earlier. There's a Q&A section in, I think, the control panel that you're seeing. So hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end, and yeah, we'll get rolling. So my name is Brad Rourke, and I'm the president, CEO of the Williams Group. Blessed to be that. So I've been with the Williams Group for just over 20 years, and yeah, working in your profession. So within the Williams Group, a little quick plug here in the Williams Group, we have essentially 3 areas of business. So we've got a full accounting and tax business, which we have about 200 clients. So if you need tax or an accounting help, and this goes to buying a practice too, we can certainly help with the tax issues when it comes to that. So accounting and tax, and then transitions, where we help practices, sellers sell, buyers buy, partners buy in, etc. So that's our transitions group. And then we have which is our original bread and butter with the Williams Group, is our consulting area, where we help practices grow or meet their targets, organize their workflow, organize their staff. So that's a little bit about us. So let's just get into we'll hit the agenda here really quickly. So there's 3 reasons I'm going to talk about why I think that it's a great idea to buy an optometry practice. Doesn't matter if you're 60 or 25 or 65, it doesn't matter. In my view, I think it's a great time to buy optometry practices. One of the reasons we're going to talk about is the machines are coming, so to speak. The AI, the humanoids, I think it's really going to change. Within the next 2 or 3 years, the world's going to change. And these things are coming fast. I think it's called Stargate. I think Trump just announced it recently that the U.S. is going to, with partners like Microsoft and NVIDIA, et cetera, they're going to put $500 billion over 4 years into the AI infrastructure. So it needs a lot of energy to run these massive compute situations, but it's going to help all businesses at all levels, I think. So I think the wealth of the world is going to change dramatically over the next few years. Just with machines helping us do work and get things done, etc. So that's going to be the first topic. Number 1 reason, not necessarily in order, but second reason is return on investment. If we just look at it, and we're going to look at this a little bit, what's the return on investment of buying an optometry practice relative to other investments? And I think they're a great investment. That's one of the reasons why private equity has moved into buying optometry practices. And so, yeah, if you're thinking about buying a practice, we'll talk about the return that you're going to get. And then thirdly, and perhaps the most importantly, is the personal benefits of owning a practice. So we'll talk about those things, and then I want to get done by, say, 10 to the hour. So if we have a bit of time, I'll provide a little information on the most recent tariffs through the new administration, executive orders that potentially relate to optometry. And then we'll have some time for Q&A, God willing. So let's just move on here to the AI situation. Excuse me. So there's a paper that came out in 2018, and it was called "Attention is All You Need," and it was put out by Google. So it more or less changed the way software development is done. So that's 2018 is really when AI just started to take off, and is growing exponentially. So the way it's structured is not like traditional programming, where you're telling the machines what to do next every step of the way. It's a completely different model. So I think Musk said 2 or 3 weeks ago that his large language model and the other ones also, they have every single thing in the world, all the data, everything that's ever been written, everything has been captured within the data models. And then the models are applied against the data to decide what the next step will be. So it's not direct programming. The machines are essentially deciding how to do things or what to do things based on probabilities. So they're looking at these massive data sets, and then based on that data set, they're making decisions on what to do next. So yeah, and they're advancing like yeah, exponentially. So we're kind of into this era now where there are AI agents. So we got these big language models. These machines essentially are going to get, and they are already getting incorporated into, and I'll just kind of show you one here. We'll move on to just some information. But here's Tesla's Optimus 3. So I'll just show you this guy catching a ball. So let's just look at that. You might not be able to hear it, but yeah, so that they're getting way more, so their dexterity. And here's this guy. I think he's in, I don't know, he's a public place. Looks like might be, doesn't matter, but he's just serving up something, so technology things or baskets to people. So these are the humanoids that are coming. So they're sort of trained this way. There's various ways to train the humanoids, but so you'll see this guy's, the bot is, the humanoid is basically replicating the human behavior. So if we back up sort of to the language models, many of you are probably using ChatGPT and the other large language models, but just as an example, I'll type in something here so you can see how this is working. If I put in develop, I'm a terrible typist, but develop a treatment plan for glaucoma. All right. So yeah, it's just going to crank this thing out. So it's just looking at the data set and pushing out what they think is the most reasonable thing based on the massive data set. So as humans, we can only remember a certain amount of things or information, but these things don't forget, and they've got a massive data set. So that's just one example of OpenAI's. OpenAI is essentially ChatGPT. So I tend to use, let me just shut this thing down, but you can see how fast it's pushing this data out or this treatment plan out. Okay, so I use Grok quite a bit. But Grok is really good for images, so for image creation, and Brittany, our marketing director, she uses this also. So if I just put in something like generate an image, an optical dispensary with, say, red sunglasses, and you can get it to with red sunglasses. So you can have this, yeah, you can tweak the images after, but watch how fast it's going to deliver these things. It takes about maybe 20 seconds. It's going to give 4 different options on the images, but then you can have it correct the images also if you want it. Okay, I don't want as many something in the images in the image, and you can just repeat it and have it produce what you want, or if you want humans or beautiful people or whatever you want in it. But yeah, so this is where the technology is going. So the whole sort of point on the AI and these humanoids, I think it's going to really reduce the cost, quite frankly, of running a practice. So I know it's going to take over a lot of the tax work. It's taking over like a lot of the law work, making contracts, etc. So if you think about these machines, that they're going to like the Optimus 3, evidently, there's going to be about 100,000 of them made this year, and then potentially 500,000 of them next year. And so the capital cost of these is about 30,000, and you know, they don't necessarily, I don't think they're necessarily going to need to type anything, say into the medical record or something. They can just use their Bluetooth devices or whatever, because you can see me typing, and I'm a terrible typist. So my input mode is that, whereas these machines are not necessarily going to have to do that. So I think that they'll be able to refract, they'll be able to scan images, say retinal images, and then analyze them, and then put that into the medical record. So that's on the potential on the doctor side, and then even at front desk, having like the telephone-based bots that are calling in. They'll be able to be trained to say exactly what your pricing is, when your next availability is. They'll be able to look potentially at the patient record and then make outbound calls saying, based on your record, you should be coming in. So the whole point of this is that a couple things is that we need to stay educated on this. Internally at the Williams Group, we're trying to stay on top of the AI models and the agents as much as we can, because business is changing, and it's certainly going to change the way optometry is delivered, I think. So I was talking to a doctor yesterday about just my thinking on all this, and so my view is that it's going to lower the cost of an investment in an optometry practice. So these things you can depreciate them obviously from tax purposes or tax reasons. They're not going to get tired. They're not going to forget anything. There's going to be a lot of benefits to humanity in general, I think, from the machines they're going to be able to do a lot of work for us that we don't really want to do, or that sort of thing. So, like I mentioned, I'm in Phoenix, and like some people may not want to deal with these machines. So here in Phoenix, we have Waymo. So Waymo is essentially they're Google cars essentially. They move them out here to Phoenix. So you can't catch a cab here in Phoenix, but you see all these Waymo self-driving cars around, and it takes a little getting used to, because you see the car, there's no one driving it. There might be a person in the back seat, and they're everywhere. But sometimes, for the most part, I'll call an Uber because I prefer to talk to someone in the car. So, these are coming for sure. So the adoption we're going to see, but point there, like I'm saying, is that it's going to lower the cost of basically the cost structure of optometry practices, or any business, quite frankly. So if you own the business and you have the license to sign the charts, I think you're in a very good investment decision, or investment position, I should say. So that's probably all I'll say on I have a summary here. So I think the machines are going to decrease operational costs, like I mentioned. I think they're going to improve care for sure, because like I'm thinking about a tax client or a consulting client, that if someone calls me, I can't remember everything about that client or about that patient or that tax client, but the machines are going to. They're not going to forget anything. So they'll be able to spit things out, like I was showing on ChatGPT about a particular treatment plan, or whatever the case may be. But so you get the idea. So that's it on the technology side of one main reason why I think that's a great idea to invest in optometry practices. And even the rural ones too, obviously, because telehealth is coming also in a big way. All this has already arrived. So with the rural practices, the access points, and telehealth, or potentially humanoids, and basically these large language models doing a lot of the work. I think it's a great opportunity to be investing in an optometry practice. So, okay, let's talk about, just from a pure investment point of view, as the second reason why I think optometry practices are a great investment. So this is simple math. Actually, just pulled this off of Grok or ChatGPT also. What are the annual returns for the S&P 500? So this is 2000 is negative 9.1, and then So this is during I think during the dot-com bubble, or it went down. Then by 2024, it went up to 28%. So it's up and down. But on average, over this period of time, the returns are 7.59%. So when you look at, if you Google this, or a large language model it and ask for an image, you'll typically see these things that just go like this if you put something into the S&P for the last 25 years. But it's a little misleading, because those are compounded rates, and it's hard to know exactly how those graphs are necessarily. You don't know the math behind them. But this is more true in my view. If I invested $100 in 2000 and then reinvested that, or just took another $100 or 100,000, whatever, in the next year, and just took the simple average, yeah, we're looking at 7.5% on the S&P. So that's still pretty good. So let's compare that to the return on investment in optometry practice. I'm going to move over to an Excel sheet in a second, but just high level. The ROI, return on investment, so you put $100 into an optometry practice, it's going to generate between 15 and 25% cash flow. So that's great. That's quite a bit better than the S&P, and you control it. You're controlling that cash flow, and it's cash. It's not necessarily capital returns. You've got the cash to decide what you're going to do with that cash. You can either invest it back into the practice, or you could put it into the S&P, or buy Bitcoin, or whatever the decisions are. So 15 to 25%. It's higher risk because there's a lot of other factors potentially, especially if you only own one practice. Then it's a lot more volatile potentially, but you're controlling it. So but still, that's what we see, 15 to 25%. And I'll show you those numbers in a moment. And then the other important point is, what's your spread between your return and your borrowing costs? So it's a pretty good spread of what your actual return is between what your borrowing costs are. It does make a lot of sense to borrow to buy, and also, unless you're sitting on a few $1,000,000 or whatever the case may be, or say $1 million, you got to borrow the money anyways, right, to buy an optometry practice. Because most ODs, I don't have $1 million just sitting around to invest in something. So the spread between the return and your borrowing costs is really important. So let's just look at, I'm rushing here so that we don't run out of time. So I'm just going to walk through this example. So just to make the numbers easy, I've got a $1 million practice. That's what they're doing gross, top line $1 million. Then these are average numbers on, say, cost of goods sold. Sometimes it can be up as high as 32% or as low as 20%. Depends on the mix of the practice, the optical versus professional. So I use 25%, fair enough. And then staff costs, same thing at 25%. But we see higher, we see lower, but it's a pretty decent average. Mind you, staff costs are definitely going up. But with the machines and AI, I think that cost is potentially going to get driven down. So overheads are typically around 8%. So you're producing $1 million, usually overheads, and that's bank, credit card charges, IT costs, office supplies, those sorts of things are typically around 8%. And then occupancy also, your space, it's typically on average around 8% with most practices, 8 to 10. Obviously, if you're producing a lot more revenue in a smaller space, that percentage is going to go down, but let's just call it 8%. And then marketing is typically minor with most practices, because most of the marketing happens with your patients selling other patients, or you doing the marketing inside the exam room, where you're telling patients that you're taking new patients, or you have new procedures, or whatever the case may be. So all of that leaves 330,000 after, so 33%. So the range is 20 to 40, give or take, with this number. So 33% operating net. So this is a net before paying for doctors to see the $1 million worth of revenue. So If we use 15%, and that's essentially what private equity tends to pay, if you're a single um, practice owner, you might say, well, if I'm working, really it should be say 17% because I'm seeing patients plus I'm doing all the administration. And I'm not working just 30 hours a week, but once you get your practice rolling, you can work 35 hours, you get your staff and whatnot all lined out and organized. Um, but typically that's not the initial amount of time that you're working, say 35 to 40 hours a week. But regardless, that's the number I've used, 150, so 15% to pay for your doctor costs. Then typically, obviously, you've got to invest back into your practice, buy new equipment, renovate, etc. So this is say, typically around 4% of your top line you want to put back into the practice. Um, so typically, you're not just dropping 40 grand on. I mean, that doesn't get you a whole lot, but these are based on 5 to 7 year um, financing terms. So you're roughly paying around 40,000, 30,000, 50,000, just to keep your practice in good condition. So that leaves $140,000. So you're doing a million, that's 140,000. So that's your cash flow after paying everyone and yourself. This is ignoring tax, but because that's yeah, you could yeah, I don't really want to get into the after tax costs because uh, yeah, some years your tax deductions can be really high and they can be low depending on um, the legislation, what's going on. So I've ignored tax for this analysis. All right. So if you were to buy this practice, say $1 million practice, you're going to pay say around 600,000 for it, give or take. So that's your investment. And then if you are generating 140,000, that's a 23% return that you're getting. So you put a 600,000 in, and then you're going to generate 140,000 on after paying for doctor costs. So that's a 23% return. So if you paid 65%, obviously your return is going to go down. You paid 650 for the $1 million practice, but you're getting the idea here as to what the return is. So even if it was say a $700,000 practice, it's a little smaller, then you're paying you probably paid 0.55 on a $750,000 practice. So 385 purchase price, it's still so your return goes up to 25%. But let me just go back to the $1 million. All right. So if we factor in the borrowing costs, so right now you can finance a practice 100% of the practice purchase price for around 6.5% borrowing costs. So your payment on that annually, if you're buying a $1 million practice, let me just go back up to 60%. So $600,000. Your annual payments are going to be $81,000. So you still got a bit of a spread left because so at 140 less the 80,000, that's essentially this 58 grand. But back to the spread. So if your return is 23% and your borrowing costs are 6.5, you're generating 16, 17% on your money. You're still ahead of the S&P or an average. So that's a pretty good return. Um, so ultimately, when you're after after your debt service is done, then you're generating pretty good cash flow for buying practices. So yeah, this is a really simple model. There's other factors involved. Um, some of the rural practices are selling at 45% of the top line. Even it's because some doctors just they can't find a buyer. Um, so there's great investment opportunities in rural areas, especially with telehealth coming, especially with the machines coming. Um, so those practices are fantastic investment in my view. And the more urban or suburban practices, you're going to pay a higher multiple than say 45 or 50% of the top line. But anyway, you kind of cut it here. The math is going to work out pretty well. Um, so so that's what I'll, so that's my view on the return on investment of an optometry practice. It's just a very good investment. Unfortunately, I can't buy one. I'm not licensed, but we certainly support people that want to buy. So that's, let's move on to the personal benefits side of owning a practice. Uh, so I think I'm an owner, actually am the owner now of the Williams Group, and so I understand a lot of the um, uh, benefits and tribulations, so to speak, of owning. I've been a shareholder since 2003 of the Williams Group, but in May of last year, I bought out the rest of the shareholders. So yeah, it's really it's an awesome way to develop yourself personally because um, it really will teach you, so to speak, when you own the business, your risk is a lot higher. So with any situation where we have a lot at stake or just a lot invested, then you've really got to be careful yourself personally at how you function with other people. Because in other situations, no one knows you, or say you're online, you can behave really badly and it doesn't really matter. But if you're the owner, then you really have to keep yourself in check, obviously, and to be able to resolve conflict and resolve conflict well. And because I think a lot of us, we have our certain methodologies to resolve conflict. So some of us might be passive, some of us might be too aggressive, or some of us might avoid issues. Whereas you can't really do that when you own a business. You have to make sure that you're trying to get yourself so that you can communicate with your staff or with your other associate doctors or whatever the case may be. So it's a really good way to force yourself to be a better person. So that's one thing. And then also systems implementation. So if you own an optometry practice, you have to implement systems into your practice. Otherwise, things are kind of chaotic. So if you're not a systems person, or if you are already a systems person, you're going to get better at it because it's essential. Because you need to know who's opening the doors, when are they going to open the doors, what's going to happen at front desk, what the workflow is going to occur through the pretest and then into the exam room and into the billing and the optical. So just being able to see like all aspects of the business and be able to put systems in place. It's a very good way to develop your basically your personal characteristics, I'll say. So that's one thing. For sure on the job creation also, um, I think it's really rewarding, I think, to be able to help other people, I suppose, and help them develop their careers. Like for instance, with our tax practice, I want to give our other licensed tax practitioners everything that I know. I want them to know. Same with business valuations or cash flow or whatever the case may be. I want them to know. So it's really helping other people develop, and then they're going to help you develop also because the communication part of that it can be challenging just to be able to communicate to people in a way that they can understand. So job development, job creation, developing others is a really big bonus, I think, for developing or for owning a practice. And then I guess a bigger picture is just providing community access to patient care. So that's a big deal. Those of you that own practices now, yeah, you can pat yourself on the back or shoulder or whatever for providing care to the community because it's super important. There's nothing more important to us than our health and our vision. So yeah, doing that is just at the end of your life, you can look back and say, yeah, I helped all these people in my community, help them see better, um, and help them with their vision and help them look better with the fashion aspect of optometry. So that's another benefit. Autonomy is certainly a good benefit also. there's pros and cons to that. I would say that if you want autonomy just to do what you want, whenever you want, owning a optometry practice, that's probably not what's going to happen, except until you've got your systems lined out, your staff lined out and everything, then you can relax a little bit. Or if you bring on associates or other owners, then you kind of have autonomy. But you're going to be tied to the business because, especially if you're a sole practitioner, if there's no one else to see the patients, you're seeing the patients. If there's a problem, you're taking care of it. But it's really rewarding because you get to solve problems and you can see how you are solving problems and then learn from your mistakes. And I've certainly made a ton of them, and we all have. So, but people are very good to you if you're open with them. I find that you tell them what your problems are, what sort of the nature of how you operate, how you deal with people. And if they understand that, then they're typically a lot more forgiving if you're, a little neurotic or crazy one day or whatever the case may be. So the autonomy, I think the autonomy part is building, but you've got autonomy in making decisions, and then you live with your own decisions. So that's good. And business acumen for sure. So if you own your practice, it's rewarding because you're going to learn all aspects of the business, like the marketing part, sales part, operations, workflow, billing, to the extent that you want to know it. In my view, it's better to know everything in the practice, because if someone doesn't show up or someone's not doing the work, it's kind of on you to get it done. So it'll broaden your spectrum of business, that's for sure. And then tax deductions also. So if you own an S corp or sole proprietorship, C corp, partnership, you've got a lot more options from a tax planning perspective. You can be aggressive or whatever the case may be, but if you're 1099, no, you don't have as many options. Or if you're an employee, you don't have as many options. You got the security, that's for sure. And then a lot of times that's really necessary in people's lives. You need the security because you've got kids or whatever loans to pay, and I need this X income. So if you've got a volatile situation in business or a optometry practice, then it can be a little more challenging, but most of it's in your control. So especially in healthcare, because I think I always say this, and you guys might disagree as ODs, but with healthcare practices, you kind of don't. There's two things. Like you only pay 1% on marketing. Most businesses are spending 10-ish on marketing. Whereas you got to do some marketing, but you don't have that level of cost as say another business, because there's a trade-off, though, I will say, because that's the insurance side of things. When that comes into play, they're bringing patients to you, and then you don't have to market necessarily, but as much. But then, so there is a sort of a hidden cost with the insurance companies bringing, but then you don't have to worry so much about that part of the business of bringing patients in. And then billing and collection is easier too, in my view. So most of the health insurance companies, they're going to pay. So you're pretty much assured they're going to pay as long as that CMS 1500 is submitted properly, and your chart matches what you're billed. The collection side of healthcare practices, the cost structure there is a lot lower. So you guys are getting squeezed from the top line for sure with insurance companies, but you've got some advantages on the cost side, and I think over time you're going to have more cost side advantages. So those are the three big reasons. I'll just go over this super quick on the tariffs and executive orders. So there's some concern if you're buying frames from China or not local, what's going to happen to the cost of those. So right now, with any frames that are coming out of China, there's already a 7.5% tariff. And so it's been proposed potentially from 10% to 60%. But I don't know. I was talking to a doctor yesterday, and he said he wasn't too worried about that because typically the cost of frames coming out of China potentially are low cost anyway. So if you're paying $10 ultimately for a frame, going to 16, it's not necessarily going to hurt independent optometry all that much. But certainly on the say lower costs or online where their margins are really thin, so that does, and they're providing low cost frames trying to undercut you. I think this potentially could, that was his position. I thought, well, yeah, you might be right on that. Um, so, uh, so I don't necessarily think that that would potentially hurt you all that badly. Um, and there is effective February 1, a 25% executive order that's been signed that for all the imports coming out of Canada and Mexico. But I don't know. I think that's a negotiating ploy. We'll see what happens if that gets pushed back or delayed or reduced. But I think that's a negotiating position at that point. So I think that's really the only two things that are on the table as of right now. So this 10% to 60% also is a from imports from China. I think that's also a negotiating point. So all the details and Congress can always step in also and say no. Um, that's contravenes Title 19, Section 301. You can't do that. But as you guys know, the presidents have had are gaining more and more power through executive orders and taking liberties on that. And so it's a complex area, but it doesn't. I don't know. I don't think it's going to affect independent practices too much. But certainly there's arguments against that. So I think that's it. Yep. So in summary, it's great to buy for those three reasons because of technology that's going to improve care and lower costs. There's a great return on investment, just period, even now, without everything that's coming potentially for buying practices, and then the personal development of buying them is a third great reason. So yeah, we'll end it there. So thanks again, and have a great weekend. Bye.